Hello, everyone. We hope the exodus doesn't continue further. Welcome to today's session. I know it's a time when the hunger pangs might have already started, so we're hoping that we're going to feed you some really interesting information. Before we start, quick show of hands. How many of you heard of Buy Now, Pay Later, BNPL, let's say 10, 15, no, my question is 10, let's say he gave me a 5-year-ago mark. I'm going to go with a 10-year-ago mark. 10 years ago, how many of you realistically heard of BNPL? Oh, yay, I got 2 hands. And yet here we are today, BNPL having completely disrupted the fintech market. What has led to this? One of the people who's been a key driver of this disruption regionally is here with us. Thanks so much, Hossam, for joining us. He's led Tabby, started it in 2019, led it, as was mentioned, to become a unicorn status company with more than $1.5 billion valuation on the path to an IPO. Thanks so much, Hossam. And as we start off, let's go back to understand, we just saw a very small show of hands. What has changed? What led to this disruption in BNPL itself?
First of all, thanks for having me. Very difficult to start a session with a mass exodus, but let's try. So we started the business in 2019 based on some learnings from my time in e-commerce prior to that. And the fact that consumers in this market just were shying away or not comfortable with digital payments at all. Especially not online. And where we are today, there's been a massive shift towards digital. One, I think, driven by just the lack of payment methods and payment options in 2019 and before that. What we had historically has been your traditional cash payment methods or credit cards. Banks in the region historically have been very averse to opening up to certain sectors of society and not willing to open them up to and give them access to credit. That has changed quite substantially. And I think this was an opportunity that we thought we could leverage. Sure. The fact that there is a sizable portion of the economy that is underserved by traditional financiers opened up a space for us and allowed us to get in. We looked at credit card penetration in this market being sub 40% in the UAE, sub 30% in Saudi, and that presented a clear gap that we could go after, providing consumers with a seamless, friendly, and transparent form of credit that could address their needs. These are customers that have jobs, they have bank accounts, and they have needs, and these needs were underserved, and coming in, providing them with that access really seemed to fill a gap in the market.
14 million users roughly is what you have now. And so, like you mentioned, it enabled financial inclusion, in a sense, BNPL. But also that we've seen concerns about debt accumulation, overspending. So how do you balance the two and ensure that it remains a safe space?
It largely comes down to incentives and business models. And if you look at how banks operate, banks, when they are providing credit to consumers, are essentially betting on the failure of that consumer, or at least that short-term failure of the consumer, in the sense that a credit card business model works when consumers revolve, when consumers are paying interest on their purchases. At that point in time, that credit card model works and makes sense. For us, we've turned that business model around and said, we will make money from the merchants. We actually require customers to pay us back on time. And therefore, we built that behavior into our business model. We will lend to consumers with a clear requirement that that consumer has to be able to afford this, or has to at least have the willingness to want to pay us back, as opposed to, again, the bank where if you are delayed, then I am better off as a bank. So the way the business model works is we integrate and we work with merchants. The merchants pay us a commission and a take rate on every transaction that goes through. Customers that default or are delinquent are not allowed to continue to transact on the platform until they are made whole or they pay us back. And that way we just align the incentives accordingly. We're only really betting on the success of that customer. We need to make sure that they have the willingness and the means to pay us back. And for that reason, that customer is happy. That customer doesn't have excessive burdens beyond their means. They don't have additional costs when they are in default. They just have to manage their finances in the short term and come back to us when they're ready.
Coming to what comes next, you recently acquired Tweak in the Saudi digital wallet. Also, plans for the IPO that's coming up. Can you take us through what next for Tabin?
So what we've done so far, over the last 4 years, we've focused intensely on building a buy now, pay later product and providing short-term credit to consumers. That was kind of the crux of what we focused on across both Saudi and the UAE. We initially focused online, then we opened up offline. We were the largest issuer of cards in the UAE in the last year. Okay. And that is a product that has really taken off in the UAE market to provide the same service, the buy now, pay later feature to consumers, not just online, but also offline. Sure. But as we've built these products and built a deeper relationship with that customer, more directly through the card, we realized that these customers have much broader needs. Again, due to kind of a lack of interest from traditional financial services providers in the region. And so, the things that we look at today are, do these customers require other forms of payment? Would they like to be able to save, and would they like to be able to invest their funds and so on? And so there's a lot more that we can build out on the financial needs of the customer. Okay. There are also financial needs for those retailers and the businesses that are also largely underserved by the banks. The banks in this region have traditionally really served kind of, the government sector, the large private sector, but on the SME side, largely been underserved as well. And these guys have needs equally as much. And so we are looking at forms of financing to merchants, forms of additional payment methods for these merchants, transfers globally, transfers regionally, et cetera. And so essentially what we will be moving from is a single product, buy now, pay later business, to a multi-product money app that serves the needs of those customers, both the consumers and the merchants alike across the region. Like, one of the things that also is missing in this part of the world is a regional financial services provider. We have a lot of exceptionally solid banks in the UAE, very solid banks in Saudi, but nobody's really serving the region as a whole, and I think that's an opportunity that we see we can go after and are well within our rights to target.
You have seen a lot of financial apps come up similar to what, maybe not exactly the same, but we're offering a lot more than just one service. So do you see fintech, just to understand lastly, where is fintech headed? Are we going to see more such apps? How does the equation with traditional large financial institutions work out? And where is it all headed?
I think one of the key challenges that a lot of fintech players face in this market, globally, is how to attract customers and drive customer acquisition in an efficient manner. Fintech, by definition, is a very low margin business. Yeah. It does require volume. And going out with traditional customer acquisition methods just doesn't scale. We've seen many wallet apps in the market fizzle out. We've seen a number of remittance-only players in the market not do too well. And it really just does go down to the fact that customer acquisition, digital customer acquisition, is extremely expensive. The banks can afford it because they have the balance sheets, they have the margins to be able to afford $100, $200, $300 CACs. Whereas in fintech, when you're going out and trying to acquire a customer for a wallet product, it just simply does not scale. We've been able to thankfully crack that through a credit model. Credit in the sense that we're providing credit to consumers that otherwise would not have access to it, and acquire that customer indirectly through that form. And trying to build an ecosystem through that. And so, to answer your question, I feel it's going to be very important for fintech players to just think about customer acquisition at the forefront of what they're trying to build, is there a real need and is there a real use case for that product? Or are you only going to go out and try to acquire customers through incentives and other forms of digital marketing that simply don't scale and hit a brick wall at some point in the not so distant future?
So will there be more consolidation in the market? Will more acquisitions that we'll see happening, you think?
Absolutely. I think consolidation is definitely on the cards. We made an acquisition recently in Saudi for precisely a wallet business that found difficulty scaling. We do see that there are other similar business models in the market that are right for consolidation. We've seen a number of investment apps pop up, a number of additional wallets in the UAE, and so on. So I do believe that there will be significant opportunities for consolidation as well investors understand the dynamics of fintech and the requirement for scale in this space. We haven't seen much of it yet, but I would say over the next coming years, we do expect quite a lot to happen.
And for Tabby itself, you already mentioned what you have planned ahead, but do you see it changing significantly in terms of how you operate, in terms of how you scale the business? Just very briefly, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, briefly, it is very, very different to move from being a single product company where the entirety of the business is focused on one and only one product, to start to really change our DNA and think about how do we address the various needs of various types of customers, right? So far, our customers, it's largely been a homogeneous view on what the customer looks like, really trying to understand the needs of a credit-seeking consumer. Going forward, those needs become a lot more broad, and us as a business need to think about how we operate differently. We also need to think about, how do we cross-sell to those customers? It is, by design, we're not going to change the way that we acquire customers considerably. We're not going to go out and start to invest in customer acquisition more aggressively. It really will be, understanding our customer base, knowing them in depth, and understanding where the various needs are, and being able to serve those customers in differing ways.
I think we've almost run out of time, but thanks so much, Hossam, and all the best. I think it's going to be exciting times ahead for you, for Tabby, and for the fintech space in the UAE, in Saudi, across the region. Lots to come up. We hope you enjoyed the session. We gave you something interesting in terms of food for thought, and have a lovely rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.